What's up, Global Village? Okay, I want to make a video discussing a topic that Elon Musk himself has brought up on many occasions, and that is about the need for humanity to become interplanetary. Needless to say, I personally feel, in the context upon which Elon has been raising the subject, to be extremely problematic, irritating in fact, very annoying, hence why I've decided to make this video. Now, just a small disclaimer here. I am visually impaired, so I never feel particularly comfortable making these videos, and a big part of that is I can't really script or tightly script what I'm going to say, because, to put it bluntly, I cannot read any script I might deem to write. So this means that I'm pretty much left with doing these videos contemporaneously and just sort of letting the words flow dynamically into my brain and then out of my mouth. Consequently, it's just not going to be as focused and coherent as someone who can actually produce a proper script and structure their whole talk accordingly. So I hope you can give me a little bit of, cut me a little bit of slack in that particular regard. And I have nevertheless made some very simple notes so that I can kind of keep this discussion at least semi on track. So as I said, this is actually a subject that I feel very strongly about, and it is because of that I am actually making this video and overcoming my general discomfort at actually having to do it. So I thought what I would do to kick it off is to go back to an older video that Elon himself actually created, or was recorded of him, talking about humanity becoming interplanetary. And this particular video was done when he was being a little less inflammatory, or at least seen as less of a controversial figure. And in fact, this was at a time, or near to a time, when I personally quite liked Elon, which I'm quite embarrassed to actually say, because in hindsight I believe, at least to a degree, he is and has always been a carefully manufactured image, and at this point perhaps not quite so carefully, as I think the mask has largely come off. However, yeah, Elon portrayed himself as being quite a different sort of person in the last several years to the person we know today. Certainly he's pivoted hard to the right, but I do believe that who Elon really is who he needs to be in order to achieve his own personal goals. And he is not an altruistic person, and he's certainly not a philanthropist. But anyway, let's go ahead and check out this video he made. And it makes some points which I don't personally feel particularly objectionable. So let's go.
I think there's two main motivations, I think, for becoming a multi-planet species and a spacefaring civilization, and then ultimately going beyond that to go to other star systems and explore the galaxy. And I think we may find that there's many one-planet civilizations that died out millions of years ago and never made it to the second planet.
Do you think in your lifetime that happens?
Well, it depends how long I live.
Maybe forever.
If I keep increasing that enemies list, it might not be much longer. It would be deeply ironic if it's someone angry on Twitter that takes me out. Anyway, I think there's two reasons for life to become multiplanetary, life as we know it to become multiplanetary. I think one is the defensive reason, where I think we want the light of consciousness to not be extinguished if something were to happen to Earth. And in the case of the dinosaurs, they only had to worry about meteors and supervolcanoes and other things. But for us humans, we actually have the power to destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons, or some sort of crazy bioterrorism thing. So so there's some danger that's not zero that could cause the end of life on Earth as we know it. So that's kind of the defensive reason to ensure that life is not just, and consciousness is not only on Earth. That's the defensive reason to protect the future of consciousness. Then the other big reason, I think, is that it's exciting, and it's adventurous, and it's inspiring, and it makes you think positively about the future, and life can't just be about solving one problem or another. There need to be reasons to be inspired, reasons that move your heart and say, yes, the future is going to be great. And when you get up, when you wake up in the morning, I can't wait to see what happens next. And I think that's, humanity going to Mars. Even if you don't yourself want to go to Mars, and most people don't, just watch it. It's a tough gig, frankly. This would not be a luxury expedition, but you'd be able to watch it happen, and I think it would just be incredibly inspiring to the world in the same way that the Apollo program was inspiring to the world. And like I said, life can't just be about solving one problem or another. We need things that make us excited and inspired about the future, and that would be one of them.
Okay, so a lot of the things he said there demonstrated exactly why in the past I actually quite appreciated Elon, in as much as being a science fiction fan and having deep existential thoughts about the fate of humanity. These are questions that do bounce around my own brain. I would, for example, like to imagine, well, what is humanity going to be like in 1,000 years, in 10,000 years, in 1,000,000 years? Of course, we can't possibly know for a certainty, but what we can do is we can imagine. And just as Elon said, imagining our future is exciting. At least if you imagine the possibility that we might have a bright future. So yeah, I don't have a problem with talking about the possibility of humanity becoming interplanetary. But the problem is that Elon talks about it as if it were an immediate existential threat. Now, he didn't really talk about it in that particular way in that video, but he certainly does talk about it now in terms of framing our apparent need to send humans to Mars and eventually colonize Mars. And that is extremely problematic. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and made myself a few little notes so that we can just go ahead and just walk through some of the bullet points or the main talking points that should really bring us to question whether we should be discussing humans becoming interplanetary as if it were some sort of talking point that needs to be put front and center of why Elon wants to spend billions and billions of dollars going to Mars. So let's start with the topic of technology. So Elon wants us to travel to Mars using chemical rocket technology, and that in itself is extremely problematic. I would put it to you that until we have developed a more sophisticated form of propulsion, we really should not be entertaining the possibility of sending humans to Mars. Certainly unmanned probes, etc., science-based missions, absolutely. But a manned mission to Mars using chemical rockets is, in my opinion, the height of folly. If we were to stop and consider what other possibilities there might be on the horizon, Well, probably the nearest realistic option we have next to chemical would be fission rockets, which would ultimately come in the form of sort of like controlled nuclear explosions, and of course all of the sort of dangerous radiation that comes along with that. So yes, fission rockets, very dangerous. A lot of safety problems, technical problems that we would need to overcome in order to use that type of technology. Yet it would still, in my opinion, from a purely technological point of view, be far preferable to chemical rockets that we are using right now, in which honestly we're just kidding ourselves if we think we can continue to use that type of tech in order to become interplanetary. After fission rockets, I think the next most realistic option is AM rockets, antimatter engines. And that is because they produce a tremendous amount of energy through annihilation, which, if we were able to harness, would likewise be a very effective way of traveling large distances. But again, we're already sort of stepping into the next layer. Incidentally, I do believe there is at least one or two startup companies that are looking into the possibility of antimatter rocket propulsion. So it's not pure science fiction. Last but not least, we would have fusion technology. And that, of course, is kind of, well, it's the type of technology that apparently has been 10 years away for the last 50 years. And I strongly suspect will continue to be 10 years away for probably the next handful of centuries. I certainly do hope that one day we do master fusion. And indeed, if we do, it's going to have a lot more value than just its ability to provide an efficient propulsion, rocket propulsion. Okay, so moving along, we have, what did I write here? Just excuse me while I struggle to try and read what I've written. Okay, so artificial intelligence. Now, I don't want to speak long on this particular topic, but large language models have led us to believe that AI has taken a giant leap forward. And in a sense, it certainly has. But large language models is not the type of AI that is going to be particularly useful to the type of artificial intelligence we might need to be part of a meaningful mission to another planet. We certainly don't need an AI that is going to just intermittently make really bizarre mistakes in terms of deciding what is fact and what is fiction. LLMs are perfect for the type of things we're using them for, but like anything, it's got a specific use case, and I would strongly suggest that use case is not a great fit with space colonization. The other thing we have to talk about actually is radiation, as it will indeed impact modern electronics. Because modern electronics, and largely due to the incredible reduction in size of transistors and how we can just pack them into such an incredibly small space, perhaps ironically makes them extremely susceptible to interference by radiation. So if we were to look at the type of electronics, the crude level of electronics that we used in the original moon missions compared to the type of electronics we use today, and our far deeper reliance on them, making sure that we have solutions that protect those electronics while we are exposing them to radiation in the vacuum of space is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. So those are just three things that we need to think about in relationship to technology. And I think the rocket propulsion is probably the biggest one of those points. And again, in my opinion, means we shouldn't even be trying to do this, not right now. So the next point I want to talk about is biology. So to state the obvious, evolution has equipped us to survive very well on the conditions of Earth. That is essentially what we are specialized to do. The moment you take us out of that environment, we basically just curl up and die very quickly. And even if we have means of extending our life, giving us oxygen, keeping our temperature, body temperature at a level that it needs to be at in order for us to continue to function, even then we are still going to have a problem in sort of the medium and long term, not the least of which being gravity and our reliance on it. We have adapted to be very well suited to exactly 1g of gravity. So even were you to put us on Mars, which has 1/3 of gravity, we have no idea what the long-term impacts of having someone on that vastly reduced gravitational field, what sort of health impacts it's going to have. But I am certain they are not going to be good. And imagine having children in a low G environment and how those small children and how their bodies might develop and, more to the point, not develop in that type of environment. The list of potential health problems, not just for first generation colonists, but the second generation of people that come after that, is probably absolutely legion. Okay, so what else do we have here? I think we can link this back a little bit to technology, and that is biotechnology. So I think as a prerequisite to becoming interplanetary, we need to develop our skills in bioengineering. In other words, we need to mess around with what evolution has given us and find ways that we can actually bioengineer our own bodies to better be able to cope with the type of conditions we're going to have both in space and in alien environments. I think this is an entirely reasonable thing to talk about, and it is a prerequisite. So why would you talk about using chemical rockets to go to Mars when you have not even really addressed the biological limitations of being human? Okay, so let's talk about time frame. So dinosaurs lived for approximately 165 million years, which is quite impressive. How do humans compare to that? Well, if you're being generous, humans have lived for about 7 million years in our most primitive and ancestral forms. Modern humans, about 200,000 years. And the vast majority of that, we were just like running around on the African plains, swinging around trees, and, eating any type of food we could come across. We just, again, it's only been in very recent times that we've had this very, very significant technological acceleration. So the point here being that we are a breathtakingly young species, and we have not proven ourselves. Dinosaurs, 165 million years, we at 7 million years, and in our current form, vastly less than that. Talking about becoming interplanetary, when it appears many people could point to the fact that our long-term prospects look very poor with taken in context of our current behaviour and the way we're treating this planet and what we're doing to the environment. So things don't look particularly good for us. So what I'm trying to point out here is that if we want to become interplanetary, we need to get our house in order right here on Earth first. So that itself is a prerequisite. And I think there's very good evidence to suggest we are not doing that. Okay, let's just talk about time and distance. And the reason I bring this up is Elon talks about becoming interplanetary, but we probably need to stop and think about what that means in terms of the size of the solar system and perhaps more specifically the size of the galaxy, which I think is roughly 100 million light years across. So let's ask ourselves, what is the fastest man-made object we have ever created? Well, it turns out it is the NASA Parker Solar Probe, and it can travel at a rather impressive 600,000 kilometers per hour. And that sounds pretty damn fast. Apparently it is close to something like about 400 times the speed of sound. So yes, pretty impressive. But let's just pump the brakes a moment and consider how fast is the speed of light. So the speed of light is approximately 300,000 kilometers per second, which means that the Parker Solar Probe is mere fractions of a percent of the speed of light. It is so unbelievably slow compared to the speed of light, and yet that is the fastest we've done. So how fast is the speed of light if we're talking about, let's just imagine for a small moment we can travel very close to the speed of light. Pure fantasy, but let's imagine we could. Well, the closest star to us is about 4 light years away. So if we could travel at the speed of light, it would still take us 4 years just to get there. Of course, we can't travel the speed of light or even anything close to it. And you might ask yourself, how long would it take the Parker Solar Probe to get to the nearest star? And the answer is 7,000 years. So the fastest thing we have ever created will take 7,000 years just to get to the nearest star, which is not our own star. Great. So let's talk about planets that we want to inhabit, because that is what would assumedly be the case if we're becoming interplanetary. Well, I can tell you straight, Mars isn't one of them. It is an absolute shithole of a place that is actively hostile to human life in almost every way, conceivable way you could think about it. So not a great place for setting up a human colony. Do we have any better options? Unfortunately, no. Mars is probably about as good as it gets. And for us to find a potentially habitable planet, we probably have to go many, many orders of magnitude beyond the 7,000 year travel time of the nearest star. The nearest G-type star, which is a star similar to our own, is about 50 light years away, and we have no evidence that it has any habitable planets orbiting its body. 50 light years away. So just multiply 7,000 by 50 orders of magnitude to get to that particular planet. That's not happening. It's certainly the sort of time frame that is quite suitable for science fiction writers, which of late I now fancy myself to be. But it's not the sort of subject matter that needs to be brought up into the public discourse of things that are front and centre of issues we need to deal with. Issues such as, for example, climate change, a topic which you never hear Elon talking about, certainly not since he pivoted to the right. I'm just going to digress here quickly, but he kind of did allude to climate change when he was looking to sell his electric cars to more liberal and left-leaning people, but that rhetoric is now completely dried up, given his new political alignment, which I think goes to demonstrate how disingenuous he is on that particular subject. But anyway, moving along, the point about time and distance is space is just big, like really, really fucking big. You wouldn't believe just how fucking big it really is. And humans becoming interplanetary, we've got a problem with both time and distance that we are not close to solving yet. All right, so the last thing I've got here, which I want to talk about, is what I'm calling drivers of progress, which kind of points towards just human society in general. Because humans, by nature, we value individualism. We are actually generally quite selfish and self-incentivized. And indeed, if we look at the lifeblood of modern society, it's based around a monetary system that focuses primarily on the requirement of personal enrichment, ultimately to survive, and then beyond that, to live a higher quality of life. So we have to look at what drives human progress, and it is primarily about making things economic, which is about appealing to why we would actually pursue a specific goal. And most of those goals have to have a payback that we as individuals can agree with and think is worthwhile doing. I would contrast this, for example, with, let's imagine a hypothetical different intelligent species that may have risen on Earth that was derived from, say, ant colonies, where they have a kind of a fundamentally altruistic view of how they protect and grow their own nest. So they will all the members of the nest will quite selflessly and in a completely unsolicited fashion sacrifice themselves for the greater good of the nest. Humans just don't work like that. And the thesis I'm kind of positing here is that may itself present a very serious problem in terms of our ultimate capacity to become interplanetary. Because when you look at all of the points I've just gone through previously, we have a lot of very challenging, very complex, and very time-consuming issues that need to be resolved. Issues that won't be resolved next year, they won't be resolved in 100 years, they probably won't be resolved in 1,000 years. We need to be looking at very long time frames, and we need to ask ourselves whether, when we look at the structure of human society, when we look at what motivates us, do we have it in us to create the sort of society that will be stable, progressive, sustainable, and deliver the sort of results that we are going to need to be delivered in order to become interplanetary. So that brings me to my last and final point, and that is the Fermi paradox, which probably most people have heard, but it's when we look out into space, and we point our most powerful telescopes, radio telescopes, in every possible direction we can, we see absolutely no evidence of other intelligent life. And it suggests that becoming interplanetary may just be one of the singular most difficult things that we could ever expect our species to be. So perhaps before aspiring to do what may just prove to be impossible, let's scale back our goals a bit and try to deal with the more immediate problems and challenges we have right now, and see if we can beat those ones, because they themselves may then provide stepping stones upon which we can ultimately defeat the Fermi paradox. All right, that's pretty much all I've got. Thank you for listening to my rambling, and I will see you again next time. I feel highly motivated to make a video on some esoteric subject. Cheers.